So tell me, I want to get into the serve call, but one quick question. When
Yeah.
you deleted social and you went full out just marketing with other strategies, what is the number one strategy that you used?
Partnerships. So specifically, whenever you can find somebody who maybe has like I don't know, like a virtual summit to pick a random example,
Mhm.
or a podcast. No, but I mean, all jokes aside, the reality is that a lot of business growth starts, as mine did and many other people's does, with referrals. But referrals, like sort of like the gold standard of referral is somebody says, "Oh, hey, Gabe, you should talk to John. You should join Gabe. You should join Soul Coach Club, John's program. You would
Mhm.
get a lot of value out of that, Gabe." I'm just gonna like leave that there in the recording for you. But but like there's that point where like so that's like the gold standard of referrals. But then there's this like level below that where it's like, okay, if Gabe on her podcast or her online conference says like, oh, John's got this really interesting strategy, let's talk about it. If you trust Gabe, I just got to borrow some of that trust and get it's a shortcut to earning your trust. Now I could still lose it. I can still do something dumb, but I'm probably not going to do that, hopefully. And so that the reality is like whenever you can have somebody sort of that's sort of like, have you met John? Like that strategy has been key. So I've used that for being on other people's podcasts. I've used that being on people's summits, partnering with other people. We'll host workshops together live. There's so many different ways you can do that, but really it just comes down to relationships. It's like who already has an audience of my target clients that I can give away value to for free, and in exchange start a relationship on my own with them. And so that's honestly a huge part of that. Now that also includes like the creator network on Kit, or there's other versions of this on Sparkloop or Beehive, or there's other tools where you can, or even Substack, where you can like recommend each other. So now I get a lot of email subscribers from other newsletters that recommend my newsletter in their Kit account in the creator network. And so, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you brought up relationship because this is actually something I
Yeah.
learned from you too, is relationships before results. I think that was part of your talk at KIT last week,
Yeah.
or not last week, last year. Wow, time goes fast.
Yeah.
But it's
Long time.
really true. Like it's about serving others. When we build
Yeah.
that relationship, when we build that connection, that's when the results are going to come. It's not about like us, right? It's not about us. And that's probably my faith talking as well, but I think that's where the serve call comes in too, because it's about building a relationship. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what would you say is the biggest mistake coaches or consultants make when they offer those free calls?
Oh, yeah. So most people they call it something clever, right? It's either a discovery call or a strategy session or a clarity call. Or I remember I talking to somebody and they were like, mine's called a compass call. And I was like, and they were like, I came up with it myself. And I was like, I'm sorry, I've seen that a lot of times actually. So we all have this clever name for this. Sometimes we just call it a consultation, right? But it's typical when you're selling something premium, like either group coaching or consulting or one-on-one coaching or any kind of freelance services. It's typical to have this one free call, whatever you call it. The biggest mistake people make there is they show up and they treat it like a shopping call, where they're like, it's sort of like you're the customer service, like at the checkout line at like Whole Foods or Starbucks or whatever, where they come up and you're like, how can I help? And like, there's actually nothing on the conveyor belt, and you're like, "You ready to check out?" And they're like, "No, I don't know." Right? And so that's a lot of the focus it becomes a shopping call where you're sort of just talking about your product. The reality is part of this comes from the idea that the term sales call, which is even if you call it something clever, you know it's a sales call. Psychologically, you show up with this pass fail energy of either you make a sale and you pass, or Gabe, what would you call a sales call where you don't make a sale?
Failure.
Yeah, a failure, right, like, does not feel good. As humans, we are ingrained physically to try not to fail. And so what I found for myself was that when I was showing up to sales calls, even if I called it something else, I was showing up as this, like, stressed, tense version of myself. So that's where ultimately the idea of serve calls started, as just renaming it, just saying, "What if we just think about it like a serve call?" The goal is show up and serve the other person really well. No matter what, they walk away going, "Wow, that was great." Well, then I figured out how to take 3 different fields and basically say like, okay, what if we take the best insights from market research and the best insights from high impact coaching and the best insights from high ticket sales, and we create one framework that does all 3 of those things. So now this is a market research customer conversation. It's a market research coaching conversation that also leads to a premium sale. So someone comes in and they walk away going, wow, that was super valuable. You walk away going, I just got a ton of market research. My target client just wrote my next sales page by answering a few questions for me. So it's like, that's a pretty good deal. So that's what a serve call is.
Yeah, that makes sense because then it's a win-win. Whether the sale
Yeah,
comes or not, you have that market
exactly.
research that you can do something with it to build your messaging out or test new messaging or, to be able to serve your target customer better
Yeah,
so
and
that
just to
it
kind of follow
lands a
this
sale.
yeah, and just to follow this, like, full circle, like, I just like, literally 20 minutes ago, right before meeting with you, just got off a call with a woman named Jerica, and a friend of mine, Amanda Getz, had invited me to come to her community and do a training, and I did a training, and then Jerica joined my email list, was like, "Wow, this guy's really interesting, I'd love to learn more." She filled out an assessment, booked a call with me, we jumped to the call, I walked through the serve call framework, at the end of it, I was like, "So, I believe I could help you, would you like me to share how?" And she was like, "Yeah," and then by the end of it, she's like, "I'm in." So she just signed up like literally 20 minutes ago. The first time I ever talked to her was on the call, but there was all this built up trust and rapport because of the relationship that she already trusted Amanda, who recommended me, that she already like read some of my stuff online and was like, oh my gosh, like it's like you're in my brain. I'm like, well, yeah, because I've talked to people like you 100 times and I have used all of that to write my sales pages based on exactly word for word what my customers say, not me imagining what they would say, but like actually asking them in a serve call. And so that's a $5,000 paycheck. So there you
Love
go.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
so now I everyone's like, "What is the serve call?
Yeah.
Tell me the method." So, let's
Yes.
dive into the framework. Can you walk us
Happy to.
through the key steps? I'll just hop in if I need to ask you a follow-up question or anything, but dive into
Yeah.
that first step.
Yeah, I will, so I'll share my screen for those who are watching, but if you're listening to this, you can also go to servetosellbook.com slash GB WS, that's the acronym, right, Gabe?
Yes, you
I
got
was
it.
like, okay, I was like, yeah, grow a business without social. Yeah, go to servetosellbook.com/GBWS and you can get a free copy of my book, Serve to Sell, which goes into more detail on this. Of course, if you go to servetosellbook.com without that acronym, you can also buy the book if you prefer. But I'm giving it to you for free because you're a friend of Gabe's and I want to be your friend too. Look at that. There
It.
you go.
Great.
So that's amazing. Glad you've got a copy right there. Okay, so let's walk through. This is like a one-page summary, right? So this is kind of what we're walking through. Okay. This is not meant to be a script, but it is meant to be a guide. So when you jump on a call with a potential client, you don't have to scratch your head about like, what do I do here? And so there are 6 key steps of what you talk through in a serve call. And then what I have here in the book, as well as in the one pager, is an outline of some suggested questions for each. But I want to emphasize real quick. The most important part of each of these steps is, if you're looking visually at this, this wasn't bold, but I'll tell you verbally, of course, what that is. So step one is relationship. So that's literally just create a relationship, create a bond. A lot of people skip this. Or well, there's 2 things people do. One thing people skip this, they jump on the call and they're like, "All right, how can I help you? What's up?" Or "What do you got going on?" And they get straight into business. Well, then what happens is the person you're talking to, they have their guard up, right? They know it's a sales call. And their guard is up, they're already ready to say no, and you haven't even offered anything yet. And so you're kind of fighting against that energy. But if you could just start by trying to just like create a connection of some kind, which usually that's common ground. So like literally it's like for me, it's like I'm talking about my kids or asking like, oh, where are you? Oh, the woman I just met, Jerica, she was like, oh, I'm like, where are you right now? Like, where are you in the world? And she was like, oh, I'm in Florida. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I'm gonna be in Florida next week. Like my wife actually grew up in Florida, but she's afraid of alligators. And she's like, oh no, we talked about alligators for a minute, right? Like that is not a script.
That's
But the
funny.
reality is just finding that common ground is enough for you to see the other person as a human and for them to let their guard down when all of a sudden they trust you and they're like, okay, this is my friend. Right. And so that makes it a lot easier for them to let the guard down and connect. Now, the kind of recommended question I have here, if you don't have any others, is just what's on your mind? It's just like, it's a good way to check in with people, but you're not limited to that question. The point is establish the relationship. Now, the number one mistake people make here is as soon as they're like, okay, I established a relationship, check. Now, what they do is they actually then say, what they say on the call is, all right, now let's get to business.
Mhm.
Well, you just ruined all of that work of establishing the relationship and you communicated that the relationship is over and the transaction has begun. So you don't do that. Instead, you just go directly smoothly from relationship into, oh, that's amazing. Yeah. So what are you working on? What's your most important goal right now? I'd love to know. And most people, when you first ask that question, they give you the coffee shop answer, right? So like Gabe, if you and I run into each other at a coffee shop and I'm like, hey, what's your most important goal right now? And you're like, oh, I'm working on the summit. I'm like, cool. The end.
Mhm.
That's the whole conversation, right?
Right.
So yeah, so now, Gabe, imagine if we take that conversation from standing in line at the coffee shop, and now we just metaphorically we go and sit down across from each other at the coffee shop, and it changes the whole mood. Now, if I'm like, "What's your most important goal right now?" Gabe, what would you say? What's your most important goal right now? What you got going on?
Oh man. Well, my most important goal is running a really successful conference and making sure that there are no hiccups.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, what else? So this is where, I mean, we don't have to like role play it too much, but I
Mhm.
just want to use it as an example of where typically what I could do is Gabe just gave a great answer that's a little bit deeper, but it's still pretty surface level, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not going to put you on the public stage here, Gabe. But typically this is where then I'll ask you like, oh, and what else? How's that going
Mhm.
so far? You know, what are you hoping that accomplishes, right? Basically, you're just going deeper into like, why does that matter to you? Why is that important to you? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? Right. And it's just getting key on. And so this is one of the first of three key areas where you take a notes. Results. This category is called results. What are the results that matter to your target client, right? And so this might be like launch a conference. I might say like, oh, how many subscribers or how many opt-ins are you hoping to get for this conference? How many tickets are you hoping to sell for the VIP or whatever that is? You know, how many what are the results you hoping that turns into for your business, right? So get into specifics here, and then we'll get into roadblocks. So roadblocks is how's that going so far? And then resources, what have you tried before today? Now, I teach this sequentially so that it's like step two, results, step three, roadblock, step four, resources. The reality is, right away, if you ask someone, what's your most important goal right now? They're usually going to give you a combo,
Mm.
right? So, like, Gabe, if you were not on a stage, you might say, like, oh, I mean, most important goal right now is launching this conference, but like, kind of worried about this thing over here. Actually, no, you did say it, right? You said, but you said, I want to make sure it doesn't, there's no issues or errors and nothing goes off. Like, you started to share
Yep.
roadblocks, right
I
away.
did.
Yeah. And then the resources, I'm like, if I'm like, well, what have you tried before today? Okay, what have you tried before today?
Well, I ran one last year. So I'm looking at
That's
everything
good.
I did last year and, using that as material. Another thing that I've tried, I have a couple friends who have done conferences. So I asked
Awesome.
them, what are your biggest takeaways from the ones you just did this year? Because I feel like even conferences are different this year
Yeah,
from last year in what's working and what's not. So those are a couple things I tried. And also hiring a little bit of help. I had not much help last year. This year I have a little bit of help. So that's really good.
that's amazing. So those are a great example of resources right there. So results, roadblocks, and resources, these three categories. So typically when we're talking to somebody, we're just collecting details. And really the goal here is like to lean into curiosity of just like be curious. And so because like honestly, if somebody asked me about my goals, like what's your big goal this year? I'm like, oh man, I'm working on my fourth book. They're like, okay, cool. The end. Right? So, but if you go deeper and you're like, well, why are you writing that book? Like, what are you hoping that accomplishes? Like, what are you excited about? What are you scared of? Like, you start getting deep into it. Oftentimes, what happens, what I've seen a lot of people, because I myself have given hundreds, I've given over 300 serve calls now to develop this framework, right? Before the framework even existed over years. So don't worry, you don't have to do 300 calls this year or anything like that. But I also, my clients have now given hundreds of these calls combined. You know, each client, is typically is given dozens of these to sell their program or 10. Usually it's you give 10 serve calls to earn your first $10,000 from your group coaching program, and then we kind of scale from there. In that, what I found is that one of the most common responses you get from people by the time you get to the end of results, roadblocks, and resources is they go, wow, no one's ever got this deep with me to talk about my goals and why it actually matters to me, right? People start to feel seen because typically we're taking like a full like 20 or 30 minutes to get through this, like to dive deep into their goals. When's the last time somebody asked you about your goals and spent more than 5 minutes on it, right? Like I love my wife and she loves what I do. She's very supportive. And she doesn't even ask me 30 minutes worth of questions about my goals. She gets the gist. She's like, great, good luck. I got you. Let me know what you need. Like, um, and so this is where you start getting to now step five, which is the recap. What is your most useful takeaway from today's call so far? Now, when you ask this question, this does a few things. This triggers the part of the brain that causes someone to reflect. So they're more likely now to look back at the call they just had and to learn from it, right? So they'll actually now they're more likely they transfer what you talked about to their long-term memory, which means that I have people sometimes who come back a year later and say, "Oh my gosh, that call a year ago, I'm still thinking about it." I'm
Mhm.
like, can you imagine someone that happened on a sales call where like someone comes back a year later and they're like, "I'm ready now." Like that does not happen. But in serve calls, it does because you lean into the recap. Now, just to be clear, the goal is not it takes a year to sell. That's just like that's the people who say no, right? It's like that's a,
Right.
you know, like the woman I mentioned today. She the first time we talked, she said yes, she bought today, right? So like that's actually more like the standard of what you want. But still, the second thing the recap does is it activates the reciprocity effect. So now if I say, here's my most useful takeaway, what I've said is here's what you gave to me. And if I'm not a sociopath, that means that I'm inclined immediately to go like, oh my gosh, I have to give you back. I owe you something. we have a debt. You've given me so much time and attention. I feel like I owe you. So a lot of times what happens here is people kind of try to take the pitch from you because at the recap that you say, what's the most useful takeaway? And you're like, oh my gosh, so much. I mean, I learned this. I didn't even realize this other thing over here. Well, what can I do for you? Like, what do you need? Right? They're turning around right away. And that's a great time for you to go into the recommendation, which is the final step, which is where you say, I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? And that question is just permission to pitch. It's very simple. The answer is always yes. Sometimes it's yes, but because someone's like, well, yes, but I don't know yet if I'm going to buy anything. And I'm like, that's fine. Would you like me to share how I can help you? Yeah. Okay, great. And then you go into the step two, what we call the triple yes recommendation. So the first yes is, I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? The second yes is where you share a prescription. You say, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you really want is this key result. I can clearly see that you have these key resources, and I'd love to help you remove this roadblock. Does that sound like a good fit so far? And all you're doing is echoing back to them what they said, right? It's active listening. It's like, I heard you say all of this. And people will still react, even though you're literally copy and paste taking from your notes exactly what they said they wanted and what they're worried about and what they have. People will say, oh my gosh, it's like you can read my mind. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. Yes. Well, great, because I have a program that's designed to promise, and I'd love to have you join. Is that something you'd like to do?
Hmm.
Now, Gabe, what are the things I didn't say as part of that final question that would typically be part of most coaches or consultants when pitch or if they have a sales call?
Well, you didn't go into the program itself and all the features of the
Right.
program and all, just talking it up and trying to convince somebody that they need all the things that are in there. You literally just asked about what about the program kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I didn't mention the price. I didn't mention the start date. I didn't mention how to join. Like
Mhm.
what we're doing here with the triple yes recommendation is by the time I get to that third question, because humans love patterns of three, they've already said yes twice. Every bone in their body wants to say yes, well, no matter what the third question is. And then the third question is great. I have a program that's designed to promise. And by the way, this is typically like you have a promise for your program. Like for my program, it's launch your sold out group coaching program without paid ads or social media. So it's like, hey, I have a program that's designed to help you launch your sold out group coaching program without relying on paid ads or social media. And I'd love to have you join. Is that something you'd like to do? And they're like,
Mhm.
well, yeah. Now, typically the most common answer you get here is yes, but. Yes, but when does it start? It starts May 1st. Would you like to be part of that? Yes, but how much does it cost? All you have to pay today is $500 to pay a deposit and save your seat. The full cost of the program is 5,000. Does that sound like something you'd like to do? Yes, but and so what happens is you're having a client-led close. So they're
Mhm.
emotionally sold, right? By the time we get to that third one, their heart's already sold. And hearts buy first. Humans make emotional decisions and then rationalize them. The reason why I spent $250 on my AirPods Pro with a laser engraved emoji on it is not because they're the best noise canceling headphones on the planet. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. I did not compare them against the other 3,000 results on Amazon that I checked are there. What I did was I knew cool people who wore AirPods Pro and they sounded cool and they looked cool and I wanted them and I wanted to be cool.
Mhm.
That's why I bought them. That's the emotional reason. Now, I logically said, they're noise canceling and it's a business expense and they're really easy to carry around. And they've got a great long charge. And I am on coaching calls all the time. My headphones are important to me, right? I logically rationalize that decision, but it was an emotional decision. The same thing happens when you're selling a coaching program. So you have to lead with what is the emotional compelling reason to join. So they say yes, and then a logic part of their brain kicks in and says, but, and then they have this internal battle where like the heart's already sold, and the head's just telling you, okay, well, here's my one question. And then all you do is you answer that one question, and then you come back to the call to action. All right, you ready to join? And what happens is, one by one, you knock out these objections until they're like, okay, yeah, I'm in. I'll pay the deposit right now. And that's it. So that's the serve call framework in a nutshell. And you can do it with everything I just said right now with zero other training. You can take this and practice this. You can role play this with a friend or with another coach. You can take this and try it on your next call with somebody. And it's seamless, right? Because it's also like typically the people you're talking to, they probably don't know what a serve call is. So we don't call it that publicly, right? That's like the framework of the back end. I still call it a free coaching call. I'm like, hey, you qualify for a free coaching call with me. Would you go ahead and book that? On the back end, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm running the call. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what questions do you have about that?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I love this because I just think it like leads into them talking the most. And
Yes.
I would, when it's like, what's your favorite or most useful takeaway? Some people might be thinking, well, how are they going to have a takeaway? They were just telling you the thing, that what they are into and all the things. But
Yeah.
I feel like people work out their own things as they're talking. So is that kind of the
Yes.
point of they still find it useful because they had that
Yeah.
conversation?
Exactly. I think that I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So, like, I had one client one time we were talking, and I'm like, "Oh, so what's your most important goal right now?" And he's like, "Well, I want to launch this course. I want to make an extra $5,000." I'm like, "Okay, 5,000, super specific. Tell me more. Why is that important?" It's like, "Well, my wife is in this job that's really demanding, and it's really like draining her. She's kind of losing herself in it. She hates it. She wants to quit, but the reality is, she can't." I'm like, "Well, why not?" Like, he's like, "Well, we did the math and our budget's just a little short. If I had $5,000, that would buy us an extra 3 months in margin where she could safely quit. And I think I could make up the rest of the money long term. And then she could be full time home with the kids, which is what we both want. So that'd be amazing." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. So, yeah, what's your plan to do that?" He's like, "We'll launch this course." I'm like, "Okay, let's break down the math." So we come back later to the recap. And I'm like, "What's your most useful takeaway from today's call so far?" He said, I knew launching this course was important to me. I knew making an extra 5K was important to me, but I don't think I'd really emotionally connected the dots on how responsible as a husband I feel. That right now my wife is trapped in this job, and I get to be the path to help her get out of that or not. It's up to me, and I didn't take that seriously. This is not just like a, "Maybe I make 5K, maybe I don't." Like, this is critical, and this is the best way that I can love my spouse in this season of life. And so I'm all in, whatever it takes, I wanna launch this thing.
What a good realization, right? Like,
Yeah,
how powerful is that? And that just came from talking it out on the serve call instead of us pitching and telling them all the things
yeah,
that we do and what we can do to help them. And all, I think about it, kind of equate it to all the pitches I get from people on my podcast. I'm like, you're not telling me anything about what you're going to do for my audience, right? Like, you're just telling me about you. I don't care. I want to know how you're
yeah.
going to serve my audience. And so it's the same thing. They don't care about me. They care about solving their problem. And so that's what we're doing in the serve call. I'm curious too, at the end, as you're giving the recommendation and you're getting those yes, but at the end they say, not now, or I'm just not sure, or whatever. Like you don't close it on the call. What happens after that?
Yeah, I try to get a reason. So like I don't really accept like just like a blanket no. Like and honestly most people don't give it because we've spent so much time together they feel like they owe me an explanation. And so people will just be like, "There's no way I can afford it right now." I'm like, "Okay, well, if again, it's like we want to come address the objective they shared." So they're just like, "I can't afford this right now." I'm like, "Okay, thank you for being honest about that. Quick question. If this program was $1, would you want to do it?" And they're like, "Oh, well, yeah." I'm like, "Okay, well, it's not $1, but let's see what we can do." Right. And so then now it's like, now we can get into like negotiating a payment plan or like whatever that might be. Like there's sometimes another path out. Sometimes it's just like 100% not a fit. And I just tell people like, and I have like a standard email lesson for this, but I also will say this in the call too. It's like, "Yeah, well, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate a firm decision one way or the other." And then what I'll tell people is when you're ready to promise, let me know. I want to make sure the last thing they remember is the promise, not the product.
Mm,
Right? So I'll say like, "Well, when you're ready to launch a sold out group coaching program, let me know." And I've had someone come back and be like, "Well, oh, okay, well, I mean, I am ready to launch a sold out group coaching program." I'm like, "Oh, well, then let's get you enrolled." They're like, "Okay." Right? Like, because it's not about like when you're ready to pay me money, because that's not the goal, right? The goal is not to pay me money to join my program. The goal is to accomplish your goal. And so, like, one of my clients, he's another example. Sean Blanc, his promise is run your full time business working part time hours. So I'll say like, "Hey, when you're ready to run your full time business working part time hours, let me know." And they'll be like, "Well, oh, yeah, actually, no, I am ready to do that." Well, I guess I'm in, right? So sometimes that's how you save it. I mean, I also had somebody who like just booked a call on my calendar a couple weeks ago, and in her notes she just said, "I'm ready." And I recognized her name. I looked, her and I had met over a year ago. And we'd had a serve call and it wasn't the right time for her. She didn't join. She bought another course I sold, but she wasn't ready to join yet. She was just on my newsletter, but we haven't really talked since then. But she booked a call when she was like, "Ready." And we jumped the call. I was like, "You ready?" She's like, "I'm ready." Like it just sometimes it's a timing thing, you know?
mhm.
And so part of that is leaving the door open is important. But I also do think a lot of times people say, "I'm not sure," or like, "Let me think about it," or like, "Let me talk to my spouse," whatever. That's a common response. Again, you wanna kind of keep the authority in the relationship without being, like, manipulative about it. So there's a way for
Mhm.
you to kind of, like, follow up and just say, like, "Oh, yeah, I totally understand you wanna think about it." But the reality is, I am your best source of information about this program. So I'd love to know when you go talk to your spouse later or when you go think about it, tell me right now what question is going to come up because I can answer it for you better right now than when I'm not in the room. And then sometimes they'll tell you the real objection that they were just embarrassed to tell you, you know, and then you can address that. Sometimes they're just like, oh no, I'm pretty sure I'm in. My wife and I have a policy. We just got to think on it. We can pray on it. We can't make decisions over $500 on an impulse. I'm like, that's fair. My wife and I have the same policy. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like I look forward to your answer. Yeah. And people do appreciate that. Having the freedom to choose. Sometimes that's all, sometimes actually it's just a test of like, they actually want to join, but they're just going like, am I free to say no? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, okay, but I don't want to. You're like, okay, great. Then say yes. Yeah.
That's funny. I love it. Well, what about as you get into the conversation, get to the recap, and you realize they're probably not a good fit? Would you change up how you do
Yeah.
the recommendation?
Oh, 100%. That's why I call it a recommendation. It does have to be a recommendation, right? If you don't recommend they join your program, then don't recommend they join your program, right? So I do try to do as much as possible, filter that out before they even get to the call, because otherwise it's kind of a disappointing serve call. It's still a serve call though, because I've had that before where I'm like, oh, I just learned something really useful. Here's a key thing that's a marker for me that someone's not a good fit. And
Mm,
so then what I'll do with the recommendation is I'll say like, well, I'm not the right person for you. I'm not the right coach for you. And if I can, I'll recommend another one. So if I can, I'll be like, oh, but you know who you should talk to is Gabe. I'm going to send you a link to her website or her book. You should check it out. I think you would get a lot of value out of that. So depending upon what someone's looking for, like, right, if your big goal right now is like to get famous on social media, you should not work with me.
right.
Um, because I deleted all my
Me
social
neither.
media. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like don't work with us. Like go work. I don't know. We'll find out whoever's famous in social media and go work with them. But I mean, I say that kind of like tongue in cheek. But the reality is, like sometimes people come in, they're like, I really. Oh, yeah, that's a good example. Someone's like, I really want to grow my YouTube channel and I want to grow this. I want to sell digital products. I don't want to do any live coaching. I want all asynchronous, like you on demand. You download it, and I'll build an audience around that. I'm like, okay, well then you should probably talk to Jay Klaus. You should subscribe to Creator Science or the Creator Lab, or like he's a good referral partner for me. There's a lot of other people I could recommend, but the reality is, it's like you got to pick somebody, and so that's what I typically try to do if I get to the recommendation they're not a good fit. Sometimes I'll just tell them. I have had this recently where I was like, "Hey, my recommendation to you is that you're not ready for coaching, but here's one assignment for you. I want you to go take this framework. I'm going to give you a free copy of my book, and I want you to go take this, and I want you to have 3 calls with potential clients, and just tell me what you learn. You don't even have anything to sell yet, but just come back and report back on what you learned from them.
Mm,
But you're not ready." And people will like they'll be like, "You're not used to that, right? In this world, you can have whatever you want." People are like, "What? I have to earn it?" I'm like, "Yeah, you have to earn the right. You're not ready." And so they'll go and they'll like, sometimes I never hear from them again, but sometimes they'll go and do the thing and report back and they're like, "Here's what I learned." And oh my gosh, my issue was all wrong. I thought I was selling this thing, but they want this thing over here, you know, which is what often happens. It's about like empathy with your target client is a lot of what I teach.
yeah, I love that. Well, I love it because you're like kind of telling them no. And people don't like to hear no either, right? So they're like, no, don't tell me I can't do this. I want to do this.
Well,
um,
even having a sold out program, that's what a lot of it is just like because a lot of what I teach is having a sold out group coaching program where you're like where someone's like, "Can I join your program right now?" And you're like, "No, it's actually closed. But we're gonna do it again sometime. So why don't you and I talk and see if you're ready to be part of the next group?" And you're like, and then so it flips the table a little bit, right? Where they're like, people want what they can't have. True story. When my wife and I got engaged and announced that, then I had 3 separate exes reach out with apology messages around how much they missed, what a poor decision they made on letting me go and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, these are all girls that dumped me, just to be clear. So I was like, okay, people want what they can't have. Now I'm not off the market. They're like, wait, but you were my backup. And I'm like, I didn't know that. That's
Thanks
not
a
nobody
lot.
wants to be. Yeah, thanks a lot. It was just comical. 3 separate women that didn't know each other. And I was like, yeah, people want what they can't have. So in this case, it's the same idea, but applied to your business.
Yeah, I love that. So, as we're kind of wrapping up, I would like to hear too, what types of premium programs do your clients typically sell with serve calls? Who's right
Yeah.
to do a serve call?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people use it for one-on-one services or group services for like done for you or freelance. It's really anything where the price point justifies it. Theoretically, you can use a serve call to sell a $50 course, but the math doesn't really work out, right? So I would say anything that you're charging $1,000 or more for, I would consider premium. And then I'm like, okay, well, then you should probably have a serve call in there. Even if you don't use that to sell 100% of it, have 10 serve calls and see what you learn from that and how many sales you make. and then see like, okay, well, how is that going to help you improve your messaging and improve your sales pages? But also, if the math works out where you do, let's just say, well, most of my clients coming in, when I teach you how to give serve calls at a professional level, and you're selling, I usually recommend for my clients, I'm usually recommending a $2,000 group coaching program is where you start before you scale up your price or your number of people. If you have 10 serve calls, and the average member I've seen can have 10 serve calls and sell 5 spots in a $2,000 program, it's a good $10,000. Where all of a sudden you're like, okay, I just had 10 one-on-one calls. I made $10,000. I could do a one-on-one call for $1,000 on average, right? It's like, and then what happens over time, you get better at it. Maybe you hire other coaches to run that for you. I've had some people do that who give serve calls on your behalf, or where you start raising your price. And so, like one of my best clients, he still does half his serve calls. He has another coach on his team that does half of them, but his program is $10,000. And so it's like as if he closes half of those calls and enrolls them into his program, and he does typically about 60% conversion rate. It's like it's still worth it for him, even as a seven-figure entrepreneur, to have a few hours a week where he's on these calls with clients where he's earning $5,000 plus per call, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's a pretty good, margin and conversion
Yeah,
rate.
it is. It is. It's a pretty good hourly rate.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. You still have to deliver the program, but especially once you get
Mhm.
into group programs, that's where it's like the cost of you delivering a program to one person or 12 or 20 is about the same. So you might as well have more people in there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, for someone who's never used this approach before, maybe they've never even done a
Yeah.
sales call, what would be the first step that you'd recommend for implementing them into their business?
I think step one is to actually to test it in a role play. Like ask an entrepreneur friend to jump on a call with you and say like, hey, I'm learning this new process for like having these serve calls. Here's what it is. You can even send them the same link, serve2sellbook.com/GBWS. I should have just said slash Gabe. I'll probably go
That
back
would
and
have been
change
easier.
that. serve2sellbook.com/Gabe. I'm officially changing it. Both links will work, but if you want to go to serve2sellbook.com/Gabe, GABE, either link will work, but I'll fix that. Then you can send them the same thing. You guys can look at the book together, and go through that process and just see what you learn about each other. But also, then the next step is test it with a potential client. Reach out to somebody who you say, "Hey, I want to learn more about the good work that you're up to. Would you be willing to jump on a call so I can learn more about your goals?" And that's usually how I position it if I'm doing outreach. Now I don't really do outreach. Most of my energy is just responding to inbound demand, but I used to do that. Everyone starts there. So that's how I position it. If they're like, well, yeah, sure, we can talk about my goals. I'm like, great. Invite them on the call, follow the process. And then even if you don't have a product, well, I mean, ideally you should have a product, but even if it's just one-on-one, just to have something at the end, we're like, hey, I'd love to work with you as your coach to help you do the thing. Is that something you'd like to do? And they're like, yes, great. That's what I'd do is I'd start by role playing with an entrepreneur friend, and then I would take it to one potential client and then just see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. So make sure to download the free copy of Serve to Sell. I showed you the book. It's
Yeah.
very easy read. You can do it in a day. It's the
Yeah.
whole framework and it will help you as you implement these serve calls. Any final thoughts about, I mean, because like while I have you and
Yeah.
you have deleted all your socials, final thoughts on like marketing without social, relationships over results, anything
Yeah.
that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, what I find is that if you put relationships before results, results come after relationships. That was the kind of thesis of my keynote talk at Craft and Commerce that you were referring to earlier. And so, like, that's really what we're talking about here. Social media kind of started as the idea of saying, like, what if we take relationships online? But over time, it's kind of morphed to this like impersonal place to like present like a fake version of yourself, or to have zero filters and be really obnoxious. And that's kind of like, and I don't really want either one of those. So what I find is just think through like how can you put relationships before results and serve people well. Maybe that's partnerships, maybe that's podcast guesting, maybe that's a free workshop, maybe that's partnering with other creators in the same space as you and promoting each other's work. But it all comes down to relationships. And the same is true when I've worked with the entrepreneurs who are operating at the highest level, who are doing 10 or $20 million a year or more from their. I said, did I just say 10 or 20? $10 or $20 million a year. I want to make sure I said the million part in their online education business. Once you start getting into it, you're like, oh, you have 3 affiliate partners that you worked with for the last 5 years and all recommended each other, and you rose together, and that's how you did it. That's always the case once you get under the hood. And so it's like you can do that now. There's nothing stopping you.